pal.
Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by Pat FinTech, the training partner that demystifies fintech and digital finance for financial services professionals. On the show this week, we welcome back Andrew Mullaney.
Hi, I'm Andrew Mullaney, and I'm CTO of Premind AI.
Sharing his story on Premind AI, a deep tech venture providing institutional investors the edge through anticipating market reactions to news events. In this chat, we get into Andrew's insights from the last 2+ years of building Premind AI, what he's figured out with how security markets respond to information, and we also look back on his top quotes from episode 57 back in September 2019 to see if his startup lessons learned held true. All right here on Money Never Sleeps.
Money never sleeps, pal.
All right, well, listen, we had you back in September 2019 on episode 57.
God, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. And lots to ask you about how the last nearly 2 years now have gone. But given that all of our listeners can go back to episode 57 and get your backstory, but why don't you just give us a quick recap on that anyway, from your cup of coffee stint with Accenture, startup number 1 with easydeals.ie, startup number 2 with NewsWhip that effectively started on a restaurant in Parliament Street here in Dublin, and then now startup number 3 with Premind AI. Just give us a quick whistle-stop tour through that, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just go one before, because I did a degree in electronic engineering, and that's a core discipline, I guess, for what I ultimately do.
Definitely.
Briefly went into Accenture, year and a half there, did some automation, which is turning it out to be quite a big area now, actually, but back then it was just a load of macros in Excel. And after that, I decided I would go into this world of startups, completely ignorant and have no knowledge at all. Youthful optimism is a great force. And so, I set up Easy Deals. It was a location-based deal platform. And it was a failure. We focused on the Irish market, which was crazy, but we didn't really know any better. And back then, it was a big deal just to digitize anything. So, the idea that all these companies would go online. But as I said in the past podcast, we were just too early, didn't know anything about how to have a global play like that. And so...
Sure, it was a great idea, though.
Yeah, it's one that, like I said before, I think it's one that a lot of people have had. And I met a few people who tried it afterwards, and there was people who tried it before. And as I mentioned in the last podcast, it was interesting listening back, what happened with Pointy. Those guys smashed it, but still not surprised that they got acquired, because I don't think it's a challenging thing to be a standalone business. It's just so big to tackle the SMB global technology without like a huge engine behind you like Google. So well done to the lads. That's fantastic. And then, afterwards, there's a bit of serendipity in how NewsWhip happens, and, meeting Paul through startup incubator programs, and just trashing out ideas. And I guess I'd learned that I wanted to go for global opportunities, because obviously the Irish market was too small, and the social media was rising. It looked big back then, but it was nowhere near as big as it is now. I mean, it's insane how it has continued. And so understanding how news spread through social networks, it was a great idea then, and it's only become more and more important. And then this is Premind, and what we're looking at is understanding how news and information impacts markets. So it's, a development on my skill set from what I worked on in NewsWhip, for sure.
Yeah, I'd say so. So many interesting lessons along the way, I'm sure, and we'll get to that in a minute. But with Premind specifically, right? And you and I first met back in December of 2018, and you told me about it back then, and my interest in the hedge fund space, just effectively focusing on the dead zone of medium frequency trading, right? Where it's 5 minutes to 1 month. You showed me the demo back in February. It looks like it's working, to say the least, right? Given that Premind is a deep tech, right? The difference between, I won't get into the difference between fintech and deep tech, but deep tech goes deeper. And because it goes deeper, it takes a lot longer. It's a lot more 100%. To do. And, it takes a long time to get it to market. What do you think has taken longer? Feeding the monster, which is effectively pushing market data and news through the machine learning algorithms, effectively training the machine? Or has it been just really, really hard tech problems to solve where you're kind of CTO, mind-bending problem solver hat is on 24/7?
I think it's a mixture of a lot of things, really. What we're doing is a very difficult problem in terms of one of the main problems is the quantity of data. And, this is something I have a lot of experience with in NewsWhip. And also the technological platforms have moved on even since we made the technology decisions in NewsWhip. And so there's more powerful things available that you can do, but that won't get you out of the hole entirely. So, to give you an example, let's say we stream through 1 million articles a day. Okay. Let's say that can roughly burst up to 20 or 30 articles in a second. And let's say a article has on average 500 words. So you would have 10,000 words a second coming through your system. And then let's say you want to monitor 57,000 stocks for which you have 20 description words of each. So you have 1 million words there. So you have 10,000 words a second coming through here that you have to stream through 1 million words over there. That's just to get a match.
Wow.
You're not even starting with, putting it into a model, putting it into some sort of metadata, putting it through a trained machine learning system and making prediction.
Wow.
So every trick in the book, really, to be honest with you. But we've learned a lot of the hard ones in NewsWhip. And another thing is your data bloats big time. That's another problem, which unfortunately have a solution. You don't think about trying to get rid of data when you start gathering it in the beginning until you've gathered it for 7 years, and then you realize you've too much of it. And so that's another thing you probably have to start thinking about too.
Yeah. And you keep hearing this out in the market that those that are building AI-driven, algorithmic-driven machine learning platforms, that the cost of storing that data and churning that data just goes through the roof.
Oh, it's nuts. I mean, hot storage. But here's the thing, if you can be smart about how, if you know how the cloud works, for instance, the difference between hot and cold storage, the price difference of maybe 100x, but how do you power a machine learning engine off cold storage? Well, you're going to have to figure that one out. So, again, it's just, and it depends on your use case. In NewsWhip, we gathered data and then we presented it. One of the good things about an AI, so maybe one of the few shortcuts you have, rather than just gathering all the data and then having to train your systems, you may not have to build such a complicated presentation layer, which can be good, and you may not actually have to have it all so actively stored in terms of you can have it stored, you can create metadata in some way and then make predictions off that rather than have it potentially visible at the click of a button at any point in time, which is what we had to be able to do in NewsWhip. People, often new customers might come in and try and run a dashboard, as we call them. They put limits on them now because they might go, okay, I want to see how many social engagements Trump got in this whole lifetime of the database. And you're talking billions and billions. And, if we didn't protect for some of that, they'd actually pull the system down.
Okay. I get it. Interesting.
Can I ask then, because obviously me and Pete have been discussing this quite a bit lately, actually, and we were really keen to get you back on. I obviously have an inside view in terms of getting to work with you guys, you and Barack, in terms of how things are progressing, which is fantastic. But on one hand, you're running these really complicated models and, all of the data you're talking about. And then on the other hand, you only have to look at the latest news article and what's going on in the stock market, and it doesn't make any sense. So I suppose I'm wondering, is that have you seen in the last year in particular, trying to build models like this versus what appears to be no sense behind what's going on in the stock market?
Well, you see, you're trying to see something that the machine wouldn't look for. We're looking for patterns that are repeated, and those patterns are repeated over and over again, thousands and thousands of times a day. But the very minute you put something, a cognitive term like sense onto it, you're out of the picture. And too many people try to put sense into this. We don't really care. We look for cause and effect. And no, the last year has been fantastic for us, really, to be honest with you. I now understand how it works. I can eyeball a lot of this stuff, and I can even talk you through a lot of trades that I've just done, knowing how the data is going, knowing how the flow of information is impacting the stock market. What we've seen in the last year, I wasn't as, last time we spoke or even beforehand, I wasn't as connected to the understanding. So I have more experience in this post-pandemic, or a bit beforehand, but time than I actually have from beforehand. But what we see is, firstly, highly information sensitive markets, because information is controlling everything now. What are the government going to do about lockdowns? What's the story with stimulus? who's allowed to even trade, are customers allowed to leave their houses, are we allowed to go on holidays? Highly, highly information sensitive. And also beyond that is everyone's at home. So, it's actually not physically possible for you to get information other way than digitally. So it's completely measurable. On top of that, there is huge level of volatility, which we see now in the markets due to this and the uncertainty, which also plays to predictive algorithm quite well, coupled with a huge amount of stimulus, which has actually nowhere else to go because the economy's closed except for the markets. So it's kind of a perfect storm, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that.
Probably in some ways it's been very beneficial to you guys, the volatility that's gone on in terms of being able to test out the model. And because, like I said, from the outside, it looks like there's no sense whatsoever to what's going on with stock prices. But it's been incredibly valuable to you guys in terms of being able to run the models and everything over the past kind of years.
I don't even need the computer to do it anymore. I mean, I can do it myself. We could probably build a fairly reasonable hedge fund off what we know already. It's just kind of exhausting and tiring, but we have a lot of automated reports that do it. And I mean, I can just talk through even the trades we did at the pandemic. At every turn of the pandemic, you just knew what was going to happen next. And so you can trade ahead of that. I guess maybe things are happening a little faster at the moment. But again, back to the example I say there with 57,000 stocks and a million articles going through it, it is very tiring to do it manually. And I've done it manually. And all of the trades I've done, they are companies I've never heard of. They have come up through our system. But we see that they get paired with something that's happening at the moment. Let's just take the coronavirus crisis because people are so familiar with it. In the beginning, the first major focus was on, if we all remember, it was on ventilators. And so my first investment I went into was Medtronic. They're an Irish company, or they have Irish manufacturing. I don't know if they're actually Irish. And so it was 20% return in 4 days. And then, that was a short-lived one. And then after that, all the focus went on to testing. They realized that actually, ventilation wasn't really, if someone got onto a ventilator, it was far, far too late. This isn't the way to deal with this problem. And so, the focus turned off it. And then the next thing was testing. And so the first FDA approved test was LabCorp America, and they had another rocket in a matter of days. And then after that, the focus went on to a drug solution, which actually didn't work out. Gilead, it was tipped, but there might have been a little bit of cake in the numbers. And after that, then it went straight to vaccinations. And we actually traded off BioNTech twice. I think the first time we bought them in was 28 and sold them at 45.
Wow.
And then bought them again at 80 and sold them at 88. And I think they're at about 140 now. Sometimes I wish I didn't play so short, because if I just left the money in there, it would have been grand. But
yeah, no, but you're following the algorithm, or you're following the own rules that you're coming up with.
I'm only doing it to learn how the thing will behave itself, and also to earn some money for myself because it's fun. But this isn't the strategy of the business, for me to make investments. I just do this with my own money. This is me to understand the cause and effect and to really tune the timing of it. But it won't be me who's doing it at the end of the day. And we have it, like I was saying to Owen there now, we have one of the key parts of what we do is our algorithms are able to detect when news was causal to market movements. And then I just encourage it to be so aggressive. When you get a machine to do something and it can do it, it's almost intimidating. And like I looked today, we ran our loader, which goes to train our system, and it picked out this example, which, this is the type of thing it will see. This is the most exciting example it could find. And it was plus 20% in an hour. It was a company that does online restaurant technologies, and the large restaurant chain had announced that they were going to use the technology, and it went up 20% the next hour with a delay, of course.
Wow.
It's crazy.
I can only imagine, Andrew, with just kind of getting to know you a bit over the last couple of years, that the diligence and curiosity and data and insights that you're just naturally inclined to dig deeper and deeper for, right? That you've done at, the Easy Deals experience behind you, the NewsWhip, obviously case in point. As CTO of that business, so much of that stuff needed to be done, right? Or else the product just wouldn't work, right? And now doing that in the public market space, it almost seems, dare I say, a bit unfair, right? That you've had this deep experience in a field that's completely unrelated to the financial markets. And now you've taken all of that knowledge and you've brought it into the financial markets. And when you and I first met, you were just talking to a few hedge fund managers that you had met for the first time, right? And you were new to this space. So I maybe retract that word unfair, but it just seems like it's amazing that you've been able to do this.
Yeah, I mean, the game is changing. Everything's like, look at the earnings reports of Amazon, of Apple, of Facebook. Technology is destroying it. I mean, we're going to have to figure out whether economics can figure its way around it. These are straight up tech companies first and foremost. And, these are difficult things to do, what we're trying to do. And tech companies have done them, tech focused and the best in the world have done them. But, other industries are watching and they just don't know how this paradigm shift in terms of what's possible now is going to impact them. They don't know how to align their organizations towards it. And I do think there's going to be just so much change in every industry. But I think tech has been its own little world from the start. And I think finance and fintech, you were saying earlier on about the difference between the beast or whatever. Fintech V1, as I call it, is kind of digitizing banking, making payments go through instantaneously, which is great. It's crazy to think that the most powerful banking institutions could be deleveraged by something so simple. But the next level then is the actual application of the more complicated systems that these technology companies are doing into all aspects of finance. It's going to be very interesting. I mean, like I said the last time, the next decade is going to be very, very interesting. Definitely some of the big players will turn around and maneuver into the new world, but there's going to be a huge amount of change.
Absolutely. But just thinking about the 24/7 nature of the crypto markets, and you knew I was going to bring this in, and the fact that the information flow in the crypto markets doesn't have that stoppage point of, hey, the market's closing for the next 12 hours or the next 16 hours or whatever. It just goes. And you've got this responsiveness of prices to news and sentiment that is unique to the crypto markets. Have you thought about that at all in terms of how these market closing in the public markets for 8 to 12 to 16 hours at a time kind of numbs the effect of some of the information flows or perhaps exacerbates it?
Yeah, look at it very, very closely. I mean, fake news is an interesting one. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's real or fake. If it's being read, it's having an impact. I mean, I think we shared something on LinkedIn. Barack found it again through our system, which picks these things out for us. I can't remember what company it was. I'll have to go and look at it. But some company made an announcement as an April Fool's joke, and it was Volkswagen.
Volkswagen, yeah, Volkswagen, as they were calling it, yeah.
That was it, and I can't remember, but it had a pretty significant impact on their stock. And it was just a joke, and obviously it got out of hand. And had that they might even get in trouble from the regulators. They'll probably get away with it. It's April Fool's Day, but who knew? We might even have to have regulation about how April Fool's Day is treated, from the fact that markets are so sensitive to information, and people are so gunning to invest off it. And then you go into crypto, and it's absolutely insane. It's But sorry, your question was more about the 24/7 nature. I mean, we see it all the time. We see, not only, as far as I can tell, a lot of publicly traded companies release information deliberately outside of hours, maybe to try and dampen the effect, maybe to try and increase it. It obviously, there's option markets, so there's things, there is a betting engine on the back of it, and then you can try and understand, options markets are mainly professional investors versus, the retail armies that may hit it. And so it's different types of companies making different types of releases have different types of impacts. And again, this is why it's almost impossible for a human being to understand this. One company that makes a release that has a popular type of following, like Elon Musk is a great example. He's got his own army of people who are so religiously loyal to him that he's almost playing his price like a fiddle. It's incredible. He's actually created a very interesting stock, not only an interesting company, the stock in itself to be studied. With crypto, it's pure wild. I think it's probably more analogous to a kind of a gambling world. We haven't done any work in crypto just because it's not our sole focus, but there's absolutely nothing stopping us doing it. And I have been triggered by our system to look at Dogecoin and so forth. And I nearly did go buy a load of Dogecoin, but I just can't bring myself to do it. The algorithms are often telling me to do things, even from the data analysis, because we're not on full prediction level yet. And I just don't have the cojones to do it, to be honest. Like, invest in hurts, because bankruptcy is a word that looks like it's going to be great. Had I done it, I probably would have got 300% return. I should have known every part of my bones that the Americans weren't going to let the company go down, but I just couldn't put my money behind bankruptcy. But, if you put your money behind plane crash, when a Boeing goes down at the right time, you're going to make money. So, that's what you're saying. There's no sense to it.
I know. But I mean, and that's the weird thing about the crypto market is that it's hard to discern between some of the news that's driving sentiment. Well, I was going to say irrational sentiment, but you like sentiment, whatever it is, rational or irrational, right? As long as it's driving something and it's driving a price. And then there's, for example,
markets were rational.
Like
a whole lot of rational economists,
Yeah,
that's what we're coming around to. Like Ethereum's on a run right now. Ethereum started going up the other day because there was a news item coming out about the European Investment Bank launching a 100 million euro bond on the Ethereum network, right? And it got off to the races. And it's like, okay, just one bit of news building on the next one and driving the price higher and higher. Do you think this is unique to the crypto markets, or is it something that we are going to see more of in the public markets as well?
It's already happening in the public markets. I mean, the real question is, how much movement is there? Think of it like an earthquake. Like how much is the soil on top going to move based on the shake below? That's why I was saying during COVID, you could get 25, 30, 40, 50, 100, up to we've seen moves 300% on a day or two. Before that, we weren't quite as involved, but we'd regularly see between 5 and 10, maybe 15% before it. So maybe it's a little bit more high than now, but I'm not sure we actually had the depth in the system to actually pick out such good examples because we didn't have as much data covering the prices mainly.
Okay.
So I mean, no, I can give you so many examples. I mean, like MGM Grand. I mean, one of the other ones that we would look at would be, say, because again, you don't have time. If I was looking at examples, I might have looked at higher level narrative examples like ventilators or vaccines rather than, say a specific announcement like one company says that they're going to use another company, which gives 20% increase in that hour. So it's kind of hard to get at that level. But let's go into higher level. Like one of the biggest ones we see over and over in multiple countries is lockdown versus open up, right? Which happens based on government releases. And so some of the smarter companies also were getting onto this tailwind. So, MGM Grand turns around, announce that, by the way, their business is completely closed. No customers can enter it because of the restrictions. And they announced that when the lockdown is lifted, that there will be free parking. And that this is like a massively released story. And, obviously everyone's bored at home and they can't wait to get back into the casino. And so they're all like, yeah, this is great. And the stock price goes up like 25, 30% over the next 4 days.
I remember you shared that one with me. Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy.
This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by Pat FinTech, demystifying fintech and digital finance for financial services professionals. Pat FinTech enable financial services professionals to transform their capabilities into the digital age with dedicated virtual training programs geared towards those that can develop, deliver, and monitor optimally customized user experiences balanced by appropriate governance, control, and oversight. To learn more about Pat FinTech, go to moneyneversleeps.ie/PAT FinTech.
I shared the story of my MBA project where I compared the S&P 500 movement in, I think, the year 1994, 1995 to the subscriptions and redemptions out of a Fidelity investment fund that was tied to the S&P 500. And the correlation was like, there was no correlation, right? And it was that the psychology and rational or irrational driving what people were doing, withdrawing or investing more money into the S&P 500 fund. It was all over the place. That psychological element of the markets. I hope that you're figuring that out.
I mean, if you want some answers, I'm not sure. I'll try it. What were you going to say?
Owen, go ahead.
I was going to ask as well, based on what you're doing and what you're learning, and like given the examples, especially the Elon Musk example, how, if anything, can the market then be regulated when, someone like Elon Musk has the ability to, as you've said it, as a really apt description, play the stock price of his business like a fiddle. How do you then manage or protect against manipulation? Or is it just a case that leave everyone to it and they can just do whatever they want, sort of thing?
It's a fantastic question because I've thought about it myself. or just even generally, it's so funny, like the rules of the market have been made based off on economic assumptions. And let's take, for example, the main economic assumption, rational is one, but the main economic assumption that we would target is the efficient market hypothesis. This is something that claims that piece of information is immediately put into the price. The market can quantify its value instantaneously. And I was only thinking about it today because, really what they're saying is that information is so important that rational investors will read up on it immediately so that they know that they need to do the right thing for their investment. That's the statement, right? That information is that important about an investment that you control that they will do this. And to a degree, there's an element of truth in it, but it's actually impossible. It's impossible because just like even the amount of reading that would need to be required to be done is not even humanly possible. And then understanding the impact of something in terms of a rational response is also not possible. And so, how do you regulate it? I mean, it seems to come down to a judgment call. I mean, we talked about the Wall Street bets. I mean, did you watch the Congress and all? I mean, it was farcical. I mean, It was absolutely great entertainment. But
I am not a cat.
What happened. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is what happens when you take assumptions to the nth degree. I think they still need them. It needs to be based upon economic theory. But at the end of the day, it's going to be possible for people with large audiences to use information. And on one side of the rule, it's manipulation. And on the other side of the rule, it's, they're discussing a stock like we are right now. Or maybe I'm manipulating the market. Just nobody cares what I'm saying at the moment.
But maybe I suppose in that example is different in some ways. And maybe the regulation has to apply to the company. So Elon Musk, obviously, even when he tweeted out saying, he thinks Tesla's overvalued and it tanked the stock almost instantly. That's different because he has a duty, to his organization, to his shareholders, as opposed to, nearly 1 million guys on the Reddit Wall Street Bets site deciding to all go after something. They don't fall under the same control. I thought the whole thing was fascinating. I was watching it closely. But, it is a different view. It's the market and the public are deciding to do this versus someone impacting their own company.
Yeah, absolutely. But the Wall Street Bets, were they manipulating? Were they deliberately? I mean, God knows. But, again, thanks to the efficient market hypothesis, thanks to that assumption that is underlying the entire market, all publicly pertinent information has to be published in order to make market participation fair. And so it's the algorithms they're fed or the humans are fed, at the end of the day, because that's what's been deemed fair is that, okay, if the information is out there in the public domain and we all had access to it and you just didn't read it because you were in bed or you were too lazy, and you suffered a 20% loss, then tough. But if someone had some sort of advantageous information against you and did so and then made a movement with that information in advance of that information being available to others, then that's cheating. And that's pretty much down to that assumption as far as I can tell, because if the market has to be efficient in terms of everyone has at least the ability to make the decision on the information.
Absolutely.
But as I know from experience in news, it's impossible to have information. It's impossible to have it hit instantly for many, many reasons.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, and I'm doing mental gymnastics just thinking about this on 3 or 4 different levels at the same time. Knowing what you're doing and metadata and predicting, it feels like, and I keep saying this, that the textbooks that my kids are going to be reading in 10 years' time on economics and market behavior will be completely different than the ones I read.
Even the ones I've read,
it's all changing.
Huge change.
It's all changing.
And look at Warren Buffett. The intelligent investor, the Bible. It's even if you take information out of it entirely, the market dynamics have changed so much. It's almost like capitalizing businesses is now more of national security, maybe even in some cases, national pride, and that it's so important economically to keep companies safe and keep employees hired that all of that stuff's gone. Maybe it's not gone forever, but certainly the hard-nosed investor like Buffett, who can come in and lend you money and capitalize your business because you can't get it from anywhere else, is gone. The government particularly at this point in time, it may change, but at this point in time, it hurts. They will just give you completely incapable to function. You up to your neck in, I don't know what it is, 30 billion in debt. You can't rent in a car anywhere in the planet, and you will be kept alive because, I guess maybe it was unfair why you weren't allowed to be in business in the first place. But, you're not going to turn to Warren Buffett if the government's just going to give you infinite cash.
No.
Yeah.
So many crazy things going on out there right now. Listen, Andrew, I picked out a couple of quotes, a couple of my favorite quotes from episode 57 that we did back nearly 2 years ago now. So the first one was, when you go through the experience of failing, you carry all the knowledge. And then even though you've got way less, you're way out in the desert with way less water and way less food, but you know how to survive and you can get outcomes way, way faster. Has that held true over the last 18 months?
I think absolutely, yeah. I mean, the pandemic has hit every aspect of life. It's obviously there's a load of personal things and different working habits and so forth, but it definitely, and things have kind of come around now, but in April last year, VC startup discussions, everybody was gone quiet. Everything went down, kind of just underground for maybe 3 months. Obviously, you couldn't even meet someone face to face, but even still, we're now doing business in this way, and it's actually brilliant because you can pitch to someone in San Francisco and then you pitch to someone in Singapore, and we've gotten rid of this requirement to shake someone's hand and go for a beer with them, which is great if you live around the corner. But it was making places like Silicon Valley almost impossible to do business because founders couldn't afford to be there, and from the VC's perspective, there are a limited amount of people they could actually target because they felt they needed to be in the same city as their startup. So it's great, but to answer your question again, things went absolutely dead, and we were basically at the completion point of a round, and everything just stopped. And I think everything stopped for everywhere. I haven't seen the hard data on startups. From what I've heard, it's been very, very hard, certainly. And so that's a scenario where you're just going through the desert, and it's just one of those things you've got to ride out, particularly with this one. It's one of these massive external scenarios that nobody could ever predict. It's just impossible. Never mind a startup. I mean, startups are fragile anyway because, they might have one big customer, and if that customer switches them off, then they have to, go through a real tough period. But, this one was complete, there's nothing you could do about it. You just have to be able to get through it. And so I do think that having the experience of just weathering through things, we didn't get phased. We were already working in a remote pattern anyway. And so it really didn't make a whole lot of difference from our business, except that the rest of the world had gone crazy, particularly before the markets actually started climbing, because a lot of people were really scared.
Oh, yeah.
Investors were really scared.
Yeah, I hear you. You just get used to it. Like when I first moved to Ireland in 1994 for 6 months on an exchange program, I ended up in Galway. Didn't bring a raincoat, right? I got used to it. Walked around soaking wet all the time. A little bit different than being in the desert with no water, being in Galway with too much water, and a bit more than that as well. Listen, episode 57, quote number 2. I'm going to make 8 decisions today, and all of them are massively consequential. That's your first day as a startup. And then tomorrow, it's going to be 28, and the next day, it's going to be 38. How many massively consequential decisions have you made over the last couple of years?
Well, the funny, as I was thinking about that, this time it's been a little bit different for me. I have probably made very few decisions since I last spoke to you. The decisions that have been made by Barack, and I'm sure then they were very consequential. But I basically, delegated that decision making, and my whole focus has been on the tech side. I guess I've made some decisions in technology. I guess you could say that, but that's my area of expertise. So yeah, I mean, I don't spend any brain time really on stuff like that, like what investors we should go with or whatever. It works really well between the two of us that way, and that allows me to focus. We were able to get prototypes of NewsWhip up reasonably quickly, and then obviously there was a lot more development work on top of it. But this one, you not only have to get all the data in place, and that's coming from multiple sources, and there's a huge amount of it, plus a huge amount of infrastructure, and then a fair dollop of solid machine learning on top of it. So, it's a bigger nut to crack.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm doing the kind of, what's the Barack Obama or the Mark Zuckerberg one? I just wear the same shirt every day, so I don't have to think about which one to wear.
And like you said, remain relatively innocuous.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can achieve both. Actually, it's been the same hoodie. Actually, I'm not wearing it now. It's a bit warm, but I was wearing the same hoodie pretty much every single day. That's fine. And you can remain quite innocuous in this new world. You can keep your calendar really clear, and it's interesting.
What's next? What's coming next for Premind AI?
So we have coverage of 57,000 stocks. We do predictions. We can do predictions from anything from, if we wanted to, a minute, but there's not much point, 15 minutes up to pretty much any time duration we want. We have that set of algorithms that picks out correlations between news events and stock movements. And we have our own news pipeline. So we've pretty much everything in place. And I've already built the training engine. And so we're just scaling up the training on the system now. So those examples that I said, we train the system on it and then pretty much go straight for live predictions. So prove the usefulness of it as quickly as possible, really, which has been the plan from the start. But we're really starting to get within touching distance of it now.
And the go-to-market strategy still with those fund managers, those money managers, hedge fund managers in the 5 minute to 1 month or 15 minute to 1 month holding period? Yeah,
I mean, again, there's actually multiple use cases that you can get from this. One is alpha. So that would be finding that example there where there's an announcement that causes a stock price to increase by 20%. That is exciting for some types of managers. Then there's another one which is called trade execution. So timing your entry and exit. And most funds are held as large-scale portfolios, and they may have hundreds of stocks. And so you might have made a decision to, tilt the portfolio from, let's say at the start of the pandemic, you say, hey, I'm going to tilt it from maybe I had some too much in construction and this pharmaceutical area is going to look important in the next 6 months. So we should move our pharmaceutical numbers from 15% to 20%. You don't want to do that in a flick of a switch because you're going to eat your own cake in terms of you'll impact the price as you start to release your positions. And so if you can do that with some sectoral knowledge around when to release it, then that's a lot smarter. And then we can go into different types of trading mechanisms as well. I mean, we're looking at the moment, we're obviously in publicly traded equities, but we can go into FX, we can go into crypto, we can grow, so that's another area where we can widen into. There's a lot of scope. There's a lot of scope really to develop it. So picking the focus is key as well.
Yeah, I mean, it does almost feel like something where it's just let the customers guide you, right, as to how they are using the product, and they're going to discover things for you that you perhaps hadn't thought of yet in terms of
or maybe the money a little bit, I mean, it's an effectiveness of the algorithm to pick out trading opportunities or positions, either attack or defense. To use kind of sporting analogy, alpha is kind of an attack and the defense on the portfolio tilting side of things. So where it works best would probably be our first area of focus in terms of highest returns. Or you're right, the customers will ultimately be the ones to notice that. And so they will be guiding us because they will let us know what's actually working for them.
Absolutely. All right. Very good. And Owen.
Yes, it's that time of the episode again.
It is that time.
Andrew, tell us something that you haven't already told us that people don't know about you.
This is always the toughest question, isn't it? How does everyone go with this one?
We had one person who refused to answer it. And said, I'm just not going to answer that. I'm going to let that one go. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I'm sure I did. I don't remember who it was. So they were relatively innocuous.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think, my girlfriend, she always says, I'm just like such a typical Irish male. And I think in nearly everywhere I am, but then I think people do get quite surprised. Definitely, I wouldn't be, like I said the last time, I wouldn't be too forward with what I do. So then sometimes that comes out and that surprises them. Or even say, obviously, if you're kind of a hard Irish male, I've actually done quite a lot of traveling when I was younger as a child, and I didn't really grow up in Ireland. I grew up in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia actually, which is a bit nuts, and in a bit in the US. And so I guess, and then from one extreme to the next, I went from being in the Middle East to being in an Irish boarding school. So most people don't know that. I guess they think I'm just a regular guy, innocuous.
That's quite a teenage experience to have, right? Your formative years.
If you had come from Ireland and you didn't have an umbrella, but maybe if we just brought you in a little bit earlier, no umbrella into school. you would get it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no umbrella, absolutely. All right, well, listen, Andrew, thanks so much for coming back. It's awesome to get this update, and I want you to come back in another 18 months and tell us how wildly successful it's been so far. So thank you.
Definitely. Really enjoyed it, as always.
Very much me too, guys. Yeah, let's stay tuned.
That does it for this week, folks, and thanks to Andrew for opening up his mind to help us figure out why he does what he does. Links are on our website at moneyneversleeps.ie, so check us out online and subscribe to our Money Never Sleeps newsletter as well. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm the founding partner at Norio Ventures, and I'm an early-stage startup advisor and investor focused on fintech and digital assets. If you'd like to talk to me about your business, drop me a voicemail on moneyneversleeps.ie. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!